Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Today we have with us a very fascinating guest. He goes by the name Andrie Leday. What makes Andrie's career track so unique is he started as a sales rep in pharmaceutical sales and then literally rose the ranks to ultimately become a regional vice president in the Texas region in the cranial and spinal division for Medtronic, one of the largest medical device manufacturers in the world. What's more interesting is how he did it, the level of intention he set when given any role, and how he really exceeded expectations and leveraged it into higher and higher levels of leadership until he ultimately got to where he is today. One of the conversations that we have in this interview that I really want to highlight is our conversation around diversity and inclusion, DEI. Andrie is a staunch advocate for DEI, and he has demonstrated that throughout his entire career. Whether it's African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, women, Andrie has taken a position to truly create opportunities and push performers forward from all spaces, and it's allowed them to really take on leadership roles within Medtronic, which in turn has helped make Medtronic a more diverse company. So this interview, we get into a lot. We get into the personal life. We get into his advocacy. We get into his intention setting and his goal-driven attitude towards his career and how he really makes things happen. But I'm already saying a lot, so I am going to stop. This is a two-part interview. I'm not going to say any more and spoil it for you. And, as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and we really hope you enjoy interview part 1. How are we doing today, Andrie?
I'm doing great, Samuel. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Another wonderful day in 2021. So you know what, Andrie? I'm just going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. Go on.
Yeah, Andrie Leday. Live just outside of Austin, Texas. Born and raised in Texas. Left shortly after graduation at Texas A&M. Moved to Colorado 14 years. Married to the love of my life the last 21 years, Miss Andrie Leday. And we have 4 amazing children, and I'm currently the Regional Vice President of Sales for Medtronic's Cranial and Spinal Technologies for the Texas-Oklahoma Shreveport region.
Wow. Okay. So that is a great introduction. Tell us a little bit about that role. What exactly is that role for those that might not be familiar?
Certainly. So Medtronic has several operating units. One of those 4 happens to be our neuroscience operating unit. And within that, one of our largest businesses is our cranial spinal technology group, which consists of our core metal and biologics for spine implants and surgeries, our enabling technologies, robotics, Mazor spinal robotics, which is one of the newest offerings, as well as surgical drills, shunts for cranial drainage, you name it. We seem to have our hand in it.
Wow, you're doing it big. And you said you had four kids?
I do, 4 kids.
Man, you're not playing around.
7. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, can't wait to get into how all that came about. All right, so let's take it back to the beginning. I always want to start with where you really started your career. And what's so cool about your career path is you actually started in pharma, but take us before that. Take us after college. Was this a career path that you knew about or something you discovered?
Listen, I wish I could start it in college. I have been selling and grinding before college. I started and found the love, and I've written an article about this historically. That was basically I was selling peacock feathers. I went age 8 to my grandfather's farm, and he was a plumber by trade and someone who couldn't afford to pay down in Southeast Texas when he sold Texas. Shout out to you. Gave him 2 peacocks and in lieu of payment. And those peacocks were, on his property, and the dogs were stressing them out. So they were dropping feathers everywhere. We show up for Easter in my finest Easter vest and pants. and with my twin brother, and they went inside. And I saw these feathers. I'm like, what are these? I'm like, oh, those are nasty, dirty, peacock feathers. I picked them all up, washed them all by hand under the sun, let them out to dry on this broken concrete shell driveway.
Yeah.
And then once they dried, I asked my aunt for a ribbon, and I tied up a bundle about maybe 8 inches around of peacock feathers. And I begged my dad to let me take them back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Wow.
What are you going to do with those dirty feathers? I said, I'm going to sell them.
Wow.
I got back to Garland, Texas, and just started my hustle game. I was selling kids the notion of making pins out of it for Mother's Day, making arrangements that you could put candles in. I literally sold all those peacock feathers, and at the end of 2 weeks, had $180.
Get out of here. Wait, how old were you when this happened?
I was 8.
You were 8 years old when you did this.
8. And then after that, got the notion I needed to buy more inventory of other things kids bought. But instead of 4-packs, I sold them as individuals, built my profit line in to give myself an allowance and buy more inventory. So it was game over.
All right, so I got to ask, tell us what you can remember. What inspired you to do this at 8 years old?
Just the value proposition of currency. Also, just for me, I was something of a quiet kid. I had a twin brother. He was the more talkative of the two.
Sure.
And so for me to find that measure of success at that age, which was more of my coming out personality-wise, it allowed me to interact with people and provide value to them. But also in return, I made a healthy income at age 8.
Wow. So you're a sales professional through and through. From a young age, you knew that selling was your thing. So walk us through. So then you had that experience. Obviously, it was very impactful. Did you go into college knowing you want to be in a sales career in the future, or where was your mind?
Yes, always in sales and marketing. So I had the opportunity to earn my undergraduate degree at Texas A&M, Lowry Mays School of Business. I was one of the 4 children in my family to attend and graduate from Texas A&M. So it always felt like home, which gave me an opportunity while there to interact as a student liaison for the president of the university. I also ran our Aggie Outreach Program, which is a philanthropy opportunity, which is student-led, and ran a team of, I think, up at one point, 60 student participants, which drove some of our alumni donations and helped that program move from $800,000 a year to $2.3 million a year in 1 year.
Wow.
So again, just looking at ways to contribute, networking as well is something I learned at Texas A&M that I'll always be thankful for as well.
That is excellent. All right. And then coming out of Texas A&M, a lot of people that I talked to, sometimes they knew about the career, but a lot of times they had no idea this was a career. Where do you lie?
I knew selling was the thing I wanted to do. I will tell you this, medical sales, medical device sales, it was absolutely foreign to me.
Wow.
And had limited, if no exposure to it until I moved to Colorado. And my father-in-law knew a lady by the name of Charlotte Wilkinson.
Okay.
And Charlotte worked for Novartis. And she knew of an opportunity in a part of Colorado that no one necessarily wanted to live, didn't want to cultivate, and passed my information over to the hiring manager, who then interviewed me and gave me an opportunity, and the rest was history.
Wow. Okay. So you started in pharma then with Novartis.
Yes.
Okay. What was that like? Did it just come natural to you because you were already a salesman, you were already a leader from college? How was it like to get that first pharma role?
I don't think any of it was natural. The only thing that was natural was to grind and to work hard. That was something instilled to me from a young age. But once I got into pharma, what I did realize is that showing up differently at times is of great benefit. And so you're always going to be provided some type of script. They're going to have expectations of what to expect. Yep. But finding a way to show up differently provided me great runway within pharma. I can tell you the offices that I interacted with, they loved my Texas accent, they loved my manners, my mannerism, being a Southerner. So being that fish out of water, plus being a Black man in Southern Colorado, I was less than 2.5% of the population. So
you stood out.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to stand out.
Right.
And not only, at that point, if you know you're going to stand out, you have a choice of how you're going to stand out.
Love
And
it.
for me, I wanted to make sure it was synonymous with service, excellence, and performance. And so, I had a great career there at Novartis, moved over to Merck vaccines. Huge shout out to Mr. Bob Rice, who gave me an opportunity at Merck.
Yes.
Another Black leader that just saw something in me and brought me over to Merck, and then moved from there to vaccines. Put together some of the most innovative programs for that vaccine group at the time,
Nice.
with some HPV vaccines, and working in partnership with Planned Parenthood to make this multi-state pilot program that was highly successful. Moved from there over to an opportunity as a district manager for Daiichi Sankyo, a Japanese pharmaceutical company. Had a chance to launch one of their business units there, and had a great measure of success, covering 500,000 square miles, I think.
So with these,
up to Canada, yeah.
with these moves, were they all highly intentional, or did opportunities kind of land in your lap because you were just performing so well in your current role?
I wish the opportunity would just land, but no, very much intentional. I'm someone who's always written down goals.
Right.
And on a piece of paper that I just track myself, my progress. And I also surround myself with like-minded people. So I have fraternity brothers and other close friends that we're running a similar race. And so we check in on each other. We, go through different discussions of challenges with each other, as well as aspirations. And there's no crabs in the barrel with this group. We always keep each other lifted. And so that's something I draw inspiration from as well. And I will say the most recent moves, we had my first child. And at the time, my wife was making more money than me as an escrow officer in mortgage. And I was in pharma as a rep. Yeah. And after 1 week, she looked at her and said, I don't think I can leave her. And I said, wait a minute, that wasn't the plan. But I said, look, if you give me, 6 months to prove to you I've got this, then we'll be good to go. So I worked 2 or 3 jobs, even while in pharma at one time, to night jobs usually.
Like what? What were you doing while you were in pharma?
I was doing nightclub security as a
farmer. Wow, that's a first.
Yeah. So again, not interfering with my employer. I always wanted to make sure I maintain my integrity. So things outside of work that I could do, like moving, things and getting paid for moving, either furniture and things of that nature. I'd always just find these odd things where I could contribute, but paid off any rotating debt that we had at the time, and showed my wife consistently that we were going to be okay and take care of this baby. So then she could, be home to give everything she wanted to our children, which she's done now masterfully for the last 17 years.
Wow. Okay. So you were a very busy guy in your original pharma roles. So talk to us a little bit about what happened when you said, I'm performing well in pharma, and there's a bright future in pharma, right? I mean, you can go the executive route in pharma just like you can in medical device sales, but for some reason you decided to make a switch. What happened there?
Sure. I was a district manager in pharma for a Japanese company at the time, Daiichi Sankyo, really, doing well. I ran into one of the regional directors for Medtronic at the airport. Okay. I'm flying out to Salt Lake City. She's flying out to Salt Lake City. Miriam Marker had a chance to interact with her, and I saw her going through some challenges on her phone, similar to my conversations on a Monday morning.
Right.
And I just say, you must be in sales. And that struck a conversation. And then at the end of that conversation, she said, have you ever considered medical device? And I said, well, absolutely. And she said, well, have you ever applied to Medtronic? I said, yeah, only as many times as I have fingers. So, but I can only assume that my skills don't quite meet the need. Sure. And I'll continue to apply in hopes that as I build more skills and experiences, that ultimately there'll be an opportunity. So she basically was my sponsor into Medtronic, and really spoke highly of me to not just her boss, but her boss's boss, because historically they don't look at people like me to come in, and not just someone who's, African American, but really someone out of the pharma space who doesn't have that, device, cutting their teeth experience, especially with capital goods. Right. And so she, was, consistent. I was consistent. And followed 10 months later,
10 months later.
10 months later from that meeting, I had an opportunity to join Medtronic. And honestly, Roy Galvin of Medtronic funded the role out of his own pocket as an associate because they didn't have headcount approval for it.
Wow.
So I had to take a double demotion in title and a severe cut in pay to join Medtronic initially and prove my worth. And then I can tell you.
So let's talk about that for a second, because you know, for you to be so open to taking that kind of cut means you really understood the opportunity with Medtronic, or was it something else?
No, absolutely. I did my homework to understand, you know, what was at the end of the rainbow, and make sure the juice, you know, was worth the squeeze as far as, you know, taking the opportunity, but also gained agreement from Roy and Miriam that, hey, once and this is literally word for word what I said in the interview.
Sure.
Once I've shown you that my skills are transferable as a sales professional and people leader,
right.
Or excuse me, at least as a sales professional, yeah. I want your support to restore me into a people leadership capacity. I'm not afraid to crawl before I walk, before I run.
Right.
And I won't even bother you about this until I cross the stage with one of your awards.
Oh, come on. That's confidence that they have to see. I love it.
In the interview. And so based on that, it gave them the confidence that at least I was going to take advantage of the opportunity. But I gained a contract at that point that once I've done this, there's no more hemming and hawing. There's no more side dancing. I want what I've asked for and
right.
you know, agreed upon that's deserving.
That's taking command of your career. Now that's, you know, I'm so glad you shared that, because that's what people need to know. It's that kind of confidence that gives any hiring manager, you know, the kind of feeling that, you know what, this is someone worth taking a chance on. I love to hear that. I really do. You also mentioned that you had applied many times to Medtronic. You know, you said as many fingers as you have on both hands. Tell us a little bit about that. You know, what was that experience like? I want to know two things, actually. How did you feel each time you applied, and what allowed you to continue applying?
Such a great question. There's that feeling when you apply for a role and it's hope, right? Yeah. And that energy and that exuberance that you feel from that. And I can't lie. I get it each and every time I apply for a role. Wow. And my poor wife, she's watched it times when I've applied for a role and not obtained it. And to see that initial deflation that you feel from that and saying, I'm not sure why you put yourself through that. And I do it for what's on the other end of that, even though it doesn't come around that often. And so with the Medtronic experience and any med device experience, when I applied, you know, there's always that excitement of, you know, I've applied for it, and then I go into student mode. I'm studying everything I can about the company, the products, even in anticipation of an interview, because I've always lived by the mantra that a lot of people do: you stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And so you never know when that call is going to come, and you may have only 60 to 90 seconds to impress upon somebody that they should sit down and meet with you. And so, a lot of energy went into it. But again, as I say before, it's more than paid off at this point. So yeah, that's what it looked like to me.
Of course. Good. So you just kept at it. You literally kept at it. So when you had this conversation at the airport, did you know she worked for Medtronic before you opened up the conversation?
I did not. I just saw a business professional, very confident, you know, lady in business professional sitting there and you know, handling her business. And the way that she spoke reminded me of myself and her very deliberate nature of how she was addressing the challenges. And so, and then the icing on the cake for me was to have the opportunity to work for said leader on her team for about 2 years or so at Medtronic and really soak up all of that additional positive energy. She was the one who told other people, this guy's going to be Rookie of the Year here at Medtronic. And I mean, put a target on my head, and some people looking at me, you know, with a third eye and things like that. Right. But she set those expectations of you know, high performance and expectations for me, and really helped me back it up with her support. And so, you know, I'll be forever grateful. And that helped give me a framework of what great leadership within Medtronic looks like as well.
Fantastic. So what field did you enter when you entered Medtronic, when you first entered Medtronic?
Neurosurgery.
Neurosurgery. So you have to, like I said, there's listeners that want to get into sales, medical sales on this podcast. There's people in medical sales, and there's leaders of medical sales. Talk to us a little bit about neurosurgery. Talk to us about that space and how you got to show up in that space.
Listen, neurosurgery is intense. It is absolutely intense when you've got surgeons from varied backgrounds, but some of the most intelligent and bold people you can imagine, that do work in the space of the brain or the base of the spine. Yeah. It's a very intense space. And so you have to be very purposeful in how you show up. Some of the things that I noted were oftentimes products in neurosurgery are sold and then sometimes not really supported, whether it be from, Medtronic or other competitors. And I wanted to be different. And so I lived in Colorado Springs, which is roughly an hour and 10 minutes away from Denver. And the majority of my work was in Denver. And I can remember the conversation with my neurosurgeons that said, look, I'm only a phone call away. I'm off the I-25 corridor. You guys call me if you need me, I will be there. And I made sure I lived by that mantra. And there were times when, you're getting up at, 5 a.m. And heading out the door and not getting, home until 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then getting up doing it all over again for, 4 weeks straight. And it can be something of a grind, but what really made it livable is knowing that I was contributing to somebody who was restoring somebody's health. Okay. And you see, children in particular, as a young dad, that really hit me hard when they're, putting shunts in the cerebral space for babies and seeing their parents in the waiting room. It inspires you to do that extra to make sure you can deliver relief for them. So,
wow, that's impactful. That is impactful. Talking about that, you were helping patients, of course, in the pharma space, and then it took you to an entirely new level. And like you said, even with children in the medical device space when you first entered for neurosurgery, what were the stark differences that hit you? And I kind of want to know if you kind of knew there were going to be these stark differences, or if some things really just hit you.
I'll tell you, it hit me. Very stark differences.
Okay.
Honestly, some of the folks that I was competing against, I would say it was more suggestion than selling that I was witnessing around me in device, and oftentimes in pharma. In pharma, you have folks that would come and drop off lunches, show pictures of their vacations and their kids, and think that they're making the best bonds with somebody who's making, $12 an hour who can't afford that next vacation. And there's just such a sense of lack of awareness of self in that whole situation. And so, when I came into pharma, I was always selling with white papers. I was launching products with ICD-9 codes from a very technical need-based, mindset. And that drove my success and gave me value in the minds of my physicians that I work with. Right. I took the same approach to device and saying, what are the needs here? And the needs were having reliability, having support, making sure that you were a value beyond just your product. And so, when I had an opportunity to be in an OR, there was a surgeon in particular that I worked with. He was considering moving his hospital's goods over to Medtronic from Stryker. Mm-hmm. And I told him before we started, I said, we have over 2,500 SKUs in the drill space. It may take some time to find the right calibration, but I'm committed to finding you a better solution if you're committed to working through it with me. And so it took 13 different cases to find the perfect solution. Wow. Okay. But when we did, he just said, Andrie, this is it. And there's no greater feeling than to hear that. He wrote the president of the operating unit at the time. We had dinner together. He shared that experience with the hospital leadership to make sure that the adoption went through for Medtronic and those drills. And what I noticed that, again, I was going to work harder than everybody else. I was going to work smarter than everybody else. And so one of the things for the Medtronic opportunity in Colorado neurosurgery was I wanted to own the I-25 corridor. It's the main vein going up through Colorado. There were opportunities out here in the West, opportunities out in the East. I let my competitors chase those. I sent some support, but my focus was the I-25 corridor because that enabled me to provide a higher level of service and connectivity that I knew I could rely on and my customers could rely on. So I made sure that was my vein. And we grew the business 35% in 10 months. And as an associate, so I wasn't getting commission.
Right.
And then once they provided me the commission opportunity the following year, we grew another 33% and went from, last page to number 4 in the country.
Wow. So first of all, that is so strategic. Clearly, you've always had that mindset, and that's what has allowed you to really go so far in your career. But I wanted to understand a little bit more, and I want the audience to really hear this too, regarding your role as an associate sales rep. So you came up with this strategy as an associate sales rep, but yet you're pretty much working for sales reps. So
my opportunity was unique.
Okay.
There was a gentleman that was leaving on military deployment, and thank you for your service. He knows who he is. But he was leaving on deployment.
Okay.
And so they were looking at me like a Band-Aid. And they literally told me, Andre, if you can't double this business, in roughly 18 months, then you're going to need to move somewhere else. I said, okay. So as I talked to this individual for about a week and a half before he left for deployment, I'm asking him very strategic questions because I came from a management background, and this is how I would assess opportunities with my team. I said, why don't we do this? Or why don't we do that? And, he would kindly tell me, we don't do that here in Device. And you'll learn that once you get here. And so I would just make note of it and not let it go away because it was a great idea, at least in my mind. Mm-hmm. And so I just needed him to, move along so that I could put these things into action. And I went over that review of those opportunities with my superiors first and asked them for their support, some of which, required them to get involved as I took a top-down approach to some of these more systematic opportunities. And again, trying to find a way to work smarter, not harder. And so, the rest is history. Listen to feedback from others. Yeah. But use your experience and your confidence to discern truth from fiction for yourself.
Hey, I'll take it every time. That's well said. Okay, so we were in neurosurgery, and then you made a move into leadership within, how fast did that happen, by the way, from associate sales rep to leading a team at Medtronic, your first
19 months.
19 months. I mean, that's record break. That is neck breaking speed. And obviously it's because of the strategies you put in. What was that like for the people around you? I mean, did they just kind of fall under and say, this is the guy? Or were you kind of getting, hated on?
I'll have to take a sip on this one. You had a nerve. So I will say this. Medtronic is built on success. Right. There are a lot of successful people who have done a great job and been successful for a long time. Sure. And there are some that obviously aspired to the role that I assumed. Right. But what made my opportunity unique is that, one, I had the verbal contract. I had the previous management experience. I had my MBA. All these different contributors before I applied for this role. And it was a role that I was well suited for back in Texas, which is where I had a landscape of experience and connectivity. And so, it wasn't necessarily comfortable. I was at the awards dinner before I assumed the role of regional sales director, which was then retitled to district manager in Texas. And we were in Nevada for our last live national sales meeting. And there were people coming up to me saying, well, it must be nice that you got a chance to ride this other person on deployment's coattail. Wow. And this person had never been better than middle of the pack ever. And, those kinds of comments or they went down the racial divide and said, it's because of this, it's because of that. Now, mind you, in 21 years, I've never missed a quota as an individual contributor or as a people leader, never missed an annual quota. Sure. Again, without knowing those receipts, and knowing more about me, I think that was, an assumption made. But I will say this, some of those very people, some of them report to me today. But
that has to feel good. I'm just going to say it for you. That has to feel good, but go ahead.
Karma. But I will say this, I don't have any scar tissue about it because the reality is we've now had a chance to work together. And I had an opportunity to work on a larger scope and scale within this organization and even beyond, such that people can get to know you. Right. And while prejudice and other mindset may be there, it's up to me to say, I'm not going to interact with that person because of that, or I'm going to shy away from things because that's how people feel, or you can rise to the opportunity. And for me, I thought it was an opportunity to rise to the opportunity such that the next person of color that moves along into this opportunity, I don't want them to think that this is a ill-placed trust from the organization. I want them to know there's greatness. Greatness and talents are boundless as far as I'm concerned. And I think a lot of people feel that way as well. It's just the opportunities which are typically limited. So,
was that a fascinating episode, or was that a fascinating episode? I just loved how transparent Andrie was with us about what he experienced in his career and what he is leading on the forefront in creating opportunities for minorities in the medical sales space, and how he takes his career on with the initiatives he sets and the attitude he has around what can be done, and really just taking things to the next level. It served him extremely well. It served Medtronic extremely well. And I hope as inspiration for all of you listening, it's also going to serve you really well. You're listening to this episode and you might be thinking to yourself, wow, these guests are fantastic. I was inspired. I learned something. I might even do something a little differently. Another guest I want to mention is Chris Larson. Chris Larson began his career in medical sales at 25, but his true path to financial freedom was as a real estate investor. While spending days in the OR was lucrative, it also kept him away from being the best father and husband that he could be. And during his 18-year career, he created enough passive income so that he could walk away from his $300,000 per year role to spend more time with his family. Now his goal is to help others achieve financial freedom as well, me included. And if you'd like to learn his secrets and how you can become financially independent, then you have to get a free copy of his book at nextlevelincome.com/book. That's nextlevelincome.com/book. Chris is the real deal. Think about that. To be able to walk away from earnings of over $300,000 a year because your business is doing well enough and truly creating for you and your family financial freedom. Why wouldn't you want to be a part of that? With what Chris is doing that allows people to become financially independent, it's worth looking into. You learn so much from his book. Doctors are on board. Medical sales executives are on board. Sales reps are on board. And if you have money to invest, if you have money that you want to put into action, this is the man that you need to do it with. Again, the book is nextlevelincome.com/book. Now, you might be listening to this episode and thinking to yourself, I loved Andrie's story. I want to do just that. I want to get into a medical device sales position, or I actually want to get into a pharmaceutical sales position. I want to have that career path. I want to make moves. I want to make changes. I want to change the game in my own right. Then I invite you to go to evolveyoursuccess.com. It's very easy. Evolveyoursuccess.com. Go to our site and simply select Attain Medical Sales Role. You'll be led to a page to fill out an application. Fill out that application, and one of us from the Evolve Your Success team will get in touch with you to learn how our program, the Medical Sales Career Builder, can take you to the next career height, a career height that you have not seen before. It can take you into your next career height, from whatever industry you're in, into a medical sales position, and you can really get started. And if you're someone in the medical sales position, and you want to get into a different position, a different leadership position, maybe within your company, or you want to make a move into a different company, or you're thinking about doing something entirely different that's in the healthcare sales space, have a conversation with us. Visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select Improve Sales Performance, schedule a call, and let's have a conversation about how our programs can really change the game for you. As always, I thank all of my listeners to listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. We do our best to bring you dynamic guests like Andrie Leday, dynamic guests like Chris Larson, so that you can learn from, get inspiration from, and really, really find out different ways to take your success to the next level. Make sure you tune in next week to another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast, and we will be getting into Andrie Leday Part 2, where we go deeper into DEI. We go deeper into his own personal career path. We go deeper into what keeps him able to be as successful as he's been. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.